Hello everyone, it's a cloudy afternoon here in Edinburgh. I've actually not had the best morning. I slept quite badly, so then it was sort of just sleeping in the morning or just resting in order to have the energy to be up now. But I thought I'll do something to get myself in a bit of a better mood, so and get on with work stuff. So I've made a matcha, which I've just learned to make recently. I never used to use the whisk thing for it, so it turned out really bad and kind of just had a lot of bits in it. Beginner mistake, I guess. But it really was a couple of years that I've had matcha very infrequently, but still. And I didn't really realise what a difference the whisk makes, but now I definitely can feel it. So I feel like now the matcha I make is like as good as the ones that I can get outside. Yeah, so today I thought I would actually talk about my experience applying for a PhD degree, and sort of how I first had the thought that I wanted to do a PhD, and it kind of has its roots in in the pandemic. I finished my undergrad in 2020, and I was injured at the time, which is also kind of important. So I had an injury from playing the piano, and so it hurt to play basically. So I wasn't really sure what to do with my music degree at the time. That, you know, everything was kind of uncertain anyway, and then I was injured as well. And so yeah, so I went ahead and I applied to do like a research focused degree in sociology at the same university where I was at, and that was kind of because of the circumstances of the pandemic, but also because I really thought I really enjoyed the process of doing my dissertation for my undergrad, and that's kind of, I think, how I've kind of gone about life, is just whenever I've had a good experience with the hands-on process of doing something, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try to get to do more of this. Rather than, I didn't really have a 5-year, 10-year, 15, 20-year plan or anything like that, and I still don't really. Maybe I have more of an idea, but definitely didn't at the time. So I just thought, okay, well, I've had a good time doing my dissertation, why not go over to the sociology department, because I was feeling a bit like an imposter in the music department anyway, and the other subject that I was wanting to study was sociology, so I thought, okay, now's a great time, and did a research focused degree because it was less expensive, but also because I really enjoyed working on a project, and yeah, and so finished that. And then during that degree, actually, I was really enjoying the process of write my master's dissertation, so I thought, okay, well, actually, you know what would be cool is get to work on a project for a number of years. And so I applied for a PhD program during that year. It was a 1-year long master's degree, but I was really late in the game because, yeah, I was really late in the game. I basically just awoke to the fact that, oh, maybe it would be interesting to do a PhD a couple of weeks before, sorry, I had to hand in an application. And so I contacted some people at the department where I had actually previously studied, and they were gracious enough to help me put together the application on a very short time frame. And I did get in, but I didn't get funding, which is understandable because there's just a lot of good projects, and a project that you've whipped out in the very end is not likely to be the very best, or the very best thought out project out there, I guess. But that was sort of encouraging, but also meant that I couldn't pursue a PhD right after the master's because I would have had to pay for it, and what I was told was that the funding of the PhDs, this was in the UK, is such that it's kind of better for you to actually not enroll before you've got the funding, because there's fewer scholarships available for people who are applying, who are already in their programs, if that makes sense. So who are applying to start being start getting funding in second year instead of as they start in first year. I don't know if that makes sense. So applying for funding after you already have began your studies, as opposed to applying for funding before you even start. Yeah. So then I went and I worked, and during that time I also really figured, so I was quite interested. My master's thesis was about music students' experiences of injury, and so I kind of just went on Google, sat at different coffee shops and had a browse of different universities in the UK. First I started with the UK, and probably Ireland as well. But yeah, I had a browse of different universities and their music department, and saw what kind of people would be available, or not available, but what kind of, and I saw what kind of professors were working there, and if there was anybody who was interested in musicians' health. And at the time I wanted to use autoethnography, so I was also looking sort of across at other departments, especially social sciences, to see if there was somebody doing autoethnography, so I could have like a kind of supervisory team of different people from the different departments. Hopefully this is accessible to someone. Hopefully this is accessible to someone who yeah, who hasn't done this process before. I don't know, I'm maybe not doing the best job of breaking it down completely, but if you haven't done a research project before in master's or undergrad, then typically it means that you kind of work one-to-one with a supervisor, or a team of supervisors who guide you in the process and give you feedback and things like that. So when you are applying for a PhD, I don't know if that's the case across the board, but at least when you're applying for the kind of PhD where it is a sort of thesis-based endeavor, upon applying, well, you can either apply to an advert of a pre-existing project that somebody in who works at the university usually has acquired funding for, or then if you want to do your own project, propose your own project, then usually you have to show that you can do it, and also that you found people who can help you do it well. So this is why bit of wrong way to start explaining this, but this is why I was googling for people. So I knew that I needed to find people and I would love to find people across music and social sciences. And yeah, so then I just sent out so at the time I had already a plan for like a research proposal, which is basically like a couple of pages explaining the study that you want to do. I already had that from my like previous attempt to enroll, which was 2 weeks of intense writing. And so yeah, so I was just sending that kind of around, and I think what I could have done better at that stage actually is that I didn't really modify that document to be at the different universities that I was applying for, or I wasn't applying yet, but I was just sending it around to different professors to see what they thought of it. And I didn't really modify the names of the university, I think, or the place, so it wasn't really entirely clear. It wasn't really targeted basically at who I was emailing it to, which I knew wasn't ideal, but also I was kind of quite exhausted at the time. So it was like a bad excuse, but maybe you know the feeling, like, yeah, I was working at the time, and so I just kind of, I wanted to get it done, and I didn't really care about it being perfect, to be honest. But yeah, so I got some people who really had issue with me not making it specific, and who sort of, yeah, just didn't really want to engage after I hadn't prepared it to the level that they would have been expecting. So that's why I say probably best to make it more targeted so that you don't get sort of people yeah, you don't put people off your study just because you didn't take the effort to modify a couple of words. Yeah, I did that, and then so sent a bunch of emails, some people replied to me, and then sort of had like I think it was like a list I had on Google Docs, like just a Word document of the people that had replied and the people that I had sent things to, and so if they hadn't replied, then I would like send them a kind reminder like a couple of weeks after, just to make sure that because of course everybody's busy, and just to make sure that they weren't they had the opportunity to reply if they wanted to, and you know, it hadn't just escaped them, right? And then I had a couple of calls with different professors, and that I think was really useful. Something that was usually, I think that was suggested by all of the professors who read my proposal rather than suggested by me, but yeah, that was really helpful at the time. And then actually the way that I got onto a PhD program finally was that I sent my proposal on to someone in Canada who said, why are you sending this to me? Like, I have a colleague who does something really similar, and so I sent it off to her, and I actually had known of her before, but I was a bit intimidated, so I hadn't sent it to her. I don't know if other people have like academic heroes and it feels like intimidating to get in touch with them, so they were like, yeah, just, I don't know, any kind of celebrity idol, I guess, but just a nerdy one. Yeah, so I sent it over to her, and she didn't actually have availability, but she did have a project which she had got funding for herself, which was going to involve a couple of PhD studies. So this was a bigger project than just one PhD, but it was going to involve a couple of PhD studies as a part of it, and it was going to use sociology and be on musicians' health. And so I just thought, oh my gosh, that's perfect. And I never thought it's not really, it depends I think on your discipline. If you're more in the sciences, I think they have more of these kinds of opportunities that come up. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's this impression that I have, that if you're in a science field, it might be that there are more of these kind of projects that get advertised, or they need someone to help analyze data or whatever as a part, yeah. Whereas in the humanities, I think it's more that you kind of come up with your own project. So I really didn't think I'd see the day when there was a musician's health project being advertised that used sociology. Like, it seemed really specific. So yeah, so I think that was definitely like a right place and right time involved. So then after that happened, I learned that it was in Australia, so I sort of took a leap of faith to go study in Australia. Well, to open myself up to the possibility of studying in Australia, which was initially really scary to me because it's so far and it was a hot country, and I couldn't really picture myself there just because I'd never lived somewhere like that, and I'm quite a nervous person. So yeah, so it was quite nerve-wracking. But then I spoke with two supervisors I had, one in Australia and one in Canada, just in an interview, and they were both really nice. And that was really something that I was looking for during the process, was when I would be talking to different professors, I wanted to see kind of their character a little bit, just because I thought, okay, well, it is wonderful to get to work on a longer project, but also it can be very stressful, so I don't want to end up working with people who belittle you or anything like that. And I could sense that, okay, it's not going to be like that. I had a really good feeling that they were going to be quite involved and quite supportive, which they really have been, just been wonderful. And yeah, so then I applied for that, but maybe I'll leave it at that rather than how I eventually got on. But I guess this was the process of sort of thinking that I wanted to do a PhD. I think honestly a part of wanting to do it for me was that I kind of really enjoy creative projects like writing or songwriting or I guess videos. I don't know. It's like, is this creative? I feel it's not maybe yet very creative, but yeah, I really enjoy sort of making things, I guess, in my own way. And then, but it's can be difficult to or I haven't found a way to get paid a regular salary doing those things. So it was kind of out of the desire to write and get paid to write, honestly, that I was interested in doing a PhD. And the because I'm doing qualitative study, a fair amount of, well, it does rely on analysis, but it's also about how you kind of write it up, and so it is also sort of a art and not just a science in that sense, and a way of yeah, just kind of, for me, I see it and I saw it as a way of kind of during my master's telling the stories of music students with injury, and then now with my PhD projects kind of essentially telling a well-researched story. It's not really a story, but telling, like, yeah, just kind of giving how to say, not giving voice, that sounds really condescending, just having the opportunity to sort of foreground or just show some music students' experience of health during their degree, and it's like it's not storytelling as in fiction, but and it's not totally comprehensive, of course it can never be, but it's sort of like a little bit like slice of life memoir type writing, a little bit tangential in my mind, at least, to that. And so yeah, so that's really what attracted me to it, to get to write about experiences that can be profound and that are important that can feel shameful, and are important to bring into the light in my mind. Yeah, I think people's reasons for doing PhD can be very different, but I think it does help if you like writing, especially if it involves writing. I say I like writing, but right now I'm in my final year of PhD, and yeah, sometimes a lot of writing. But yeah, I did definitely at least enroll with the idea that I liked writing, and I do really like writing. Sometimes when you do much of anything, like a lot of anything, it can feel like a bit much, but yeah, I think that's it. So yeah, just wanted to kind of explain my own rationale of doing a PhD, which I guess is probably a bit idealistic, honestly, but also I don't know if it's entirely idealistic. I think, well, maybe it is. I could go on a tangent. But it's important to do things that you find meaningful, and I feel like this was a way that I could tell stories, or not fictional stories, but and get paid to do that. Really, that was important for me. And yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to show is that it is a long process. I did work on the applications and on contacting people and things over several months, and it was kind of getting up before work, sometimes really early hours, to be honest. Like getting up and starting work at like maybe 6 to 8 or something like that, because my work started at 8:30, maybe not 6 to 8, 6 to 7:30 or something, and working like at weekends at applications and things like that. And yeah, just also want to, like, I was very pleased that I managed to secure a PhD position in like I guess maybe 9 months-ish, but I felt like I really wanted the chance to work on project and work on telling important stories and important experiences. I would have been happy to wait longer as well to do it if I had to. And I did have various rejections along the way, like, yeah, like I said, I mean, first I did get in the program, but I didn't get funding. Sometimes those applications are separate. Okay, I've talked way too long. So I had to start a new one. I actually deleted an old video. But anyway, so I was just gonna say, I did have setbacks, and I want to make that really clear. And I don't think that, you know, it's one of those things where if you do get in, it's not because you're incredible and so much better than other people. It might be, but I don't think that was the case for me. I think, even though I'm amazing, but you know, there's a lot of interesting ideas out there, and people have people are clever, and they have good ideas, and they work hard to make their proposals. And so sometimes you don't always know whether you're missing out on something by a fine margin, or whether you still have quite a bit of work to do, which is where it's, I guess, good to get feedback. But also equally, yeah, there is a bit of right place and right time involved in terms of like that place that I eventually did get was just really well suited for me, and I could use most of my training in that project, which, if it was any other project, nearly any other kind of project, you know, it would have been a steeper learning curve for me. And so it is a bit of chance and things lining up for sure. But in my experience, it was also tiring early mornings, because I like mornings better than afternoons or nights, to be honest. Weekends, and yeah, emailing people, not hearing back from people, hearing back from people negative things sometimes, hearing positive things, having calls, meeting people who are keen, meeting people who were indifferent actually as well. So yeah, I think it's just important to, I think some of the advice that I did get when I was applying during my master's was really important, and to not get discouraged. I think the advice that I got from my master's made me much more resilient, so I just kind of want to pass it on, that it's really normal that you might not, everything might not align the first time, or you might not, you know, like supervision, your project, funding, not all those things might align at once to make it possible for you to do a PhD if you want or need to be financially supported, which is kind of, I think, a fair thing to expect. Yeah, and yeah, so don't be discouraged, I guess is the message that I have. But I probably will make videos about the early time of my PhD as well, and where I am at now, although I feel like it's nicer to talk about things in the past than right now, because right now I'm sort of writing and don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm writing. So I don't know if I can talk about that in a way where I see the bigger picture for it to be at all helpful to anyone else. So that might come later, or maybe I'll just talk about being confused and writing. But yeah, hopefully this has been maybe in some way helpful to people considering doing a PhD. And yeah, I don't expect that many. I actually think that, well, I would be surprised to learn that more people just like writing and want to write and do projects, want to do creative things. Maybe that's more people's reason for doing a PhD, but I sort of expect that maybe other people, at least there will be some proportion of people who are maybe a bit more like organized, or plan ahead a bit more, or want to maybe have a thought they want to be in academia or something like that, which is also probably what we're kind of taught to do, and I think that's totally fair enough. But yeah, that was my experience, my point of view, and it has been very meaningful. It has been very hard, but it has been very meaningful to get to work on a project for a number of years that I find purposeful. So I don't know that I would do it again, as in like from the start, but if I hadn't done it, I would do it again. If that makes sense. Once is enough, but once is a good ride.